Section 35 of Agatha Webb. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Gabby Cowan. Agatha Webb by Katharine Green. Part 3 of Why Agatha Webb Will Never Be Forgotten in Sutherlandtown. Dear Philemon, you are gone for a day and a night only, but it seems a lengthened absence to me, meriting a little letter. You have been so good to me, Philemon, ever since that dreadful hour following our marriage, that sometimes, I hardly dare yet to say always, I feel that I am beginning to love you, and that God did not deal with me so harshly when He cast me into your arms. Yesterday I tried to tell you this when you almost kissed me at parting, but I was afraid it was a momentary sentimentality, and so kept still. But today such a warm wellspring of joy rises in my heart when I think that tomorrow the house will be bright again, and that in place of the empty wall opposite me at table, I shall see your kindly and forbearing face. I know that the heart I had thought impregnable has begun to yield, and that daily gentleness and a boundless consideration from one who had excuse for bitter thoughts and recrimination are doing what all of us thought impossible a few short months ago. Oh, I am so happy, Philemon, so happy to love where it is now my duty to love. And if it were not for that dreadful memory of a father dying with harsh words in his ears, and the knowledge that you, my husband, yet not my husband, are bearing ever about with you echoes of words that in another nature would have turned tenderness into gall, I could be merry also, and sing as I go about the house, making it pleasant and comfortable against your speedy return. As it is, I can but lay my hand softly on my heart as its beatings grow too impetuous, and say, God bless my absent Philemon, and help him forgive me. I forgive him, and love him as I never thought I could. That you may see that these are not the weak outpourings of a lonely woman, I will here write that I heard today that John and James Zabel have gone into partnership in the shipbuilding business, John's uncle having left him a legacy of several $1,000s. I hope they will do well. James, they say, is full of business and is, to all appearance, perfectly cheerful. This relieves me from too much worry in his regard. God certainly knew what kind of a husband I needed. May you find yourself equally blessed in your wife. Another letter to Philemon a year later. Dear Philemon, hasten home, Philemon. I do not like these absences. I am just now too weak and fearful, since we knew the great hope before us. I have looked often in your face for a sign that you remembered what this hope cannot but recall to my shuddering memory. Philemon, Philemon, was I mad? When I think what I said in my rage, and then feel the little life stirring about my heart, I wonder that God did not strike me dead rather than bestow upon me the greatest blessing that can come to a woman. Philemon, Philemon, if anything should happen to the child, I think of it by day, I think of it by night. I know you think of it too, though you show me such a cheerful countenance and make such great plans for the future. Will God remember my words, or will He forget? It seems as if my reason hung upon this question. A note this time in answer to one from John Zabel. Dear John, Thank you for your words, which could have come from nobody else. My child is dead. Could I expect anything different? If I did, God has rebuked me. Philemon thinks only of me. We understand each other so perfectly now that our greatest suffering comes in seeing each other's pain. My load I can bear, but his, come and see me, John, and tell James our house is open to him. We have all done wrong, and are caught in one net of misfortune. Let it make us friends again. Below this, in Philemon's hand. My wife is superstitious. Strong and capable as she is, she has regarded this sudden taking off of our firstborn as a sign that certain words uttered by her on her marriage day, unhappily known to you, and, as I take it, to James also, have been remembered by the righteous God above us. This is a weakness which I cannot combat. Can you, who alone of all the world beside know both it and its cause, help me by a renewed friendship, whose cheerful and natural character may gradually make her forget? If so, come like old neighbors, and dine with us on our wedding day. If God sees that we have buried the past and are ready to forgive each other the faults of our youth, perhaps he will further spare this good woman. I think she will be able to bear it. She has great strength, except where a little child is concerned. That alone can henceforth stir the deepest recesses of her heart. After this a gap of years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children were laid away to rest in Portchester churchyard. Then Philemon and she came to Sutherlandtown, but not till after a certain event had occurred, best made known by this last letter to Philemon. Dearest husband, our babe is born, our sixth and our dearest, and the reproach of its first look had to be met by me alone. Oh, why did I leave you and come to this great Boston, where I have no friend but Mrs. Sutherland? Did I think I could break the spell of fate or Providence by giving birth to my last darling among strangers? I shall have to do something more than that if I could save this child to our old age. It is borne in upon me like fate that never will a child prosper at my breast or survive the clasp of my arms. If it is to live, it must be reared by others. Some woman, who has not brought down the curse of heaven upon her by her own blasphemies, must nourish the tender frame and receive the blessings of its growing love. Neither I nor you can hope to see recognition in our babe's eye. Before it can turn upon us with love, it will close in its last sleep, and we will be left desolate. What shall we do, then, with this little son? To whose guardianship can we entrust it? Do you know a man good enough or a woman sufficiently tender? I do not. But if God wills that our little Fredrick should live, he will raise up someone. By the pang of possible separation already tearing my heart, I believe that he will raise up someone. Meanwhile, I do not dare to kiss the child, lest I should blight it. He is so sturdy, Philemon, so different from all the other 5. I open this to add that Mrs. Sutherland has just been in with her 5 weeks-old infant. His father is away too, and has not yet seen his boy, and this is their first after 10 years of marriage. Oh, that my future opened before me as brightly as hers. The next letter opens with a cry. "Philemon, come to me, Philemon! I have done what I threatened. I have made the sacrifice. Our child is no longer ours, and now perhaps he may live. But oh, my breaking heart, my empty arms, help me to bear my desolation, for it is for life. We will never have another child." "And where is it?" "Ah, that is the wonder of it. Near you, Philemon, yet not too near. Mrs. Sutherland has it, and you may have seen its little face through the car window if you were in the station last night when the express passed through to Sutherlandtown. Ah, but she has her burden to bear too, an awful secret burden like my own, only she will have the child for Philemon, she has taken it in lieu of her own, which died last night in my sight, and Mr. Sutherland doesn't know what she has done, and never will, if you keep the secret, as I shall, for the sake of the life of our little innocent has thus won." "What do I mean, and how was it all?" "Philemon, it was God's work, all but the deception, and that is for the good of all, and to save 4 broken hearts. Listen. Yesterday, only yesterday, it seems a month ago, Mrs. Sutherland came again to see me with her baby in her arms. Mr. Sutherland is expected home, as you know, this week, and she was about to start out for Sutherlandtown, so as to be in her own house when he came. The baby was looking well, and she was the happiest of women, for the one wish of his heart and hers had been fulfilled, and she was soon going to have the bliss of showing the child to his father. My own babe was on the bed asleep, and I, who am feeling wonderfully strong, was sitting up in a little chair as far away from him as possible. Not out of hatred or indifference, oh no, but because he seemed to rest better when left entirely by himself, and not under the hungry look of my eye. Mrs. Sutherland went over to look at it. "Oh, he is fair like my baby," she said, "and almost as sturdy, though mine is a month older," and she stooped down and kissed him. Philemon, he smiled for her, though he never had for me. I saw it with a greedy longing that almost made me cry out. Then I turned to her and we talked. Of what? I cannot remember now. At home we had never been intimate friends. She is from Sutherlandtown and I am from Portchester, and the distance of 9 miles is enough to estrange people. But here, each with a husband absent and a darling infant lying asleep under our eyes, interests we have never thought identical drew us to one another, and we chatted with ever increasing pleasure, when suddenly Mrs. Sutherland jumped out in a terrible fright. The infant she had been rocking on her breast was blue. The next minute it shuddered. The next it lay in her arms dead. I heard the shriek, yet, with which she fell with it still in her arms to the floor. Fortunately no other ears were open to her cry. I alone saw her misery. I alone heard her tale. The child had been poisoned. Philemon, poisoned by her! She had mistaken a cup of medicine for a cup of water, and had given the child a few drops in a spoon just before setting out from her hotel. She had not known at the time what she had done, but now she remembered that the fatal cup was just like the other, and that the two stood very near together. Oh, her innocent child! And oh, her husband! It seemed as if the latter thought would drive her wild. "He has so wished for a child," she moaned. We have been married 10 years, and this baby seemed to have been sent from heaven. He will curse me. He will hate me. He will never be able, after this, to bear me in his sight. This was not true of Mr. Sutherland, but it was useless to argue with her. Instead of attempting it, I took another way to stop her ravings. Lifting the child out of her hands, I first listened at its heart, and then, finding it was really dead— Philemon, I have seen too many lifeless children not to know. I began slowly to undress it. "What are you doing?" she cried. "Mrs. Webb, Mrs. Webb, what are you doing?" For reply I pointed to the bed, where two little arms could be seen feebly fluttering. "You shall have my child," I whispered. "I have carried too many babies to the tomb to dare risk bringing up another." And catching her poor wandering spirit with my eye, I held her while I told her my story. "Philemon, I saved that woman." Before I had finished speaking, I saw the reason return to her eye, and the dawning of a pitiful hope in her passion-drawn face. She looked at the child in my arms, and then she looked at the one in the bed, and the long-drawn sigh with which she finally bent down and wept over our darling told me that my cause was won. The rest was easy. When the clothes of the two children had been exchanged, she took our baby in her arms and prepared to leave. Then I stopped her. "Swear," I cried, holding her by the arm and lifting my other hand to heaven. "Swear you will be a mother to this child. Swear you will love it as your own and rear it in the paths of truth and righteousness." The convulsive clasp with which she drew the baby to her breast assured me more than her shuddering. I swear that her heart had already opened to it. I dropped her arm and covered my face with my hands. I could not see my darling go. It was worse than death. For the moment it was worse than death. "Oh God, save him," I groaned. "God, make him an honor." But here she caught me by the arm. Her clutch was frenzied. Her teeth were chattering. "Swear in your turn," she gasped. "Swear that if I do a mother's duties by this boy, you will keep my secret and never, never reveal to my husband, to the boy, or to the world that you have any claims upon him." It was like tearing the heart from my breast with my own hand, but I swore. "Philemon," and she in her turn drew back. But suddenly she faced me again, terror and doubt in all her looks. "Your husband," she whispered. "Can you keep such a secret from him? You will breathe it in your dreams." "I shall tell him," I answered. "Tell him." The hair seemed to rise on her forehead, and she shook so that I feared she would drop the babe. "Be careful," I cried. "See, you frighten the babe. My husband has but one heart with me. What I do he will subscribe to. Do not fear, Philemon." So I promised, in your name. Gradually she grew calmer. When I saw she was steady again, I motioned her to go. Even my more than mortal strength was failing. And the baby, Philemon, I have never kissed it, and I did not kiss it then. I heard her feet draw slowly towards the door. I heard her hand fall on the knob, heard it turn, utter one cry, and then— They found me an hour after, lying along the floor, clasping the dead infant in my arms. I was in a swoon, and they all think I fell with the child, as perhaps I did. and that its little life went out during my insensibility. Of its features, like and yet unlike our boy's, no one seems to take heed. The nurse who cared for it is gone, and who else could know that little face but me? They are very good to me, and are full of self-reproaches for leaving me so long in my part of the building alone. But though they watch me now, I have contrived to write this letter, which you will get with one, telling of the baby's death and my own dangerous condition. Destroy it, Philemon, and then come. Nothing in all the world will give me comfort but your hand laid under my head and your true eyes looking into mine. Ah, we must love each other now and live humbly. All our woe has come from my early girlish delight in gay and elegant things. From this day on I eschew all vanities and find in your affection alone the solace which heaven will not deny to our bewildered hearts. Perhaps in this way the blessing that has been denied us will be visited on our child, who will live, I am now sure, to be the delight of our hearts and the pride of our eyes, even though we are denied the bliss of his presence and affection. Mrs. Sutherland was not seen to enter or go out of my rooms. Being on her way to the depot, she kept on her way, and must be now in her own home. Her secret is safe, but ours, oh, you will help me to preserve it. Help me not to betray. Tell them I have lost 5 babies before this one. Delirious. There may be an inquest. She must not be mentioned. Let all the blame fall on me if there is blame. I fell. There is a bruise on the baby's forehead, and I am growing incoherent. I will try and direct this, and then love, oh God. A scroll for the name. Under it these words: though bidden to destroy this, I have never dared to do so. Some day it may be of inestimable value to us or our boy. Philemon Webb. This was the last letter found in the first packet. As it was laid down, sobs were heard all over the room, and Fredrick, who for some time now had been sitting with his head in his hands, ventured to look up and say, "Do you wonder that I endeavored to keep this secret, bought at such a price and sealed by the death of her I thought my mother, and of her who really was? Gentlemen, Mr. Sutherland loved his wife and honored her memory. To tell him, as I shall have to within the hour, that the child she placed in his arms 25 years ago was an alien, and that all his love, his care, his disappointment, and his sufferings had been lavished on the son of a neighbor, required greater courage than to face doubt on the faces of my fellow townsmen, or anything in short but absolute arraignment on the charge of murder. Hence my silence, hence my indecision, till this woman," here he pointed a scornful finger at Amabel, now shrinking in her chair, "drove me to it by secretly threatening me with a testimony which would have made the murderer of my mother and the lasting disgrace of a good man who alone has been without blame from the beginning to the end of this desperate affair. She was about to speak when I forestalled her. My punishment, if I deserve such, will be to sit and hear in your presence the reading of the letters still remaining in the coroner's hands." These letters were certain ones written by Agatha to her unacknowledged son. They had never been sent. The first one dated from his earliest infancy, and its simple and touching hopefulness sent a thrill through every heart. It read as follows: 3 years old, my darling, and the health flush has not faded from your cheek, nor the bright gold from your hair. Oh, how I bless Mrs. Sutherland that she did not rebuke me when your father and I came to Sutherlandtown and set up our home where I could at least see your merry form toddling through the streets, holding on to the hand of her who now claims your love. My darling, my pride, my angel, so near and yet so far removed. Will you ever know, even in the heaven to which we all look for joy after our weary pilgrimage is over, how often in this troubled world, and in these days of your early infancy, I have crept out of my warm bed, dressed myself, and without a word to your father, whose heart it would break, gone out and climbed the steep hillside just to look at the window of your room, to see if it were light or dark, and you awake or sleeping, to breathe the scent of the eglantine which climbs up to your nursery window. I have braved the night damps and the watching eyes of heaven. But you have a child's blissful ignorance of all this. You only grow and live, my darling, live, which is the only boon I crave, the only recompense I ask. Have I but added another sin to my account, and brought a worse vengeance on myself than that of seeing you die in your early infancy? Fredrick, my son, I heard you swear today, not lightly, thoughtlessly, as boys sometimes will in imitation of their elders, but bitterly, revengefully, as if the seeds of evil passions were already pushing to life in the boyish breast. I thought so innocent. Did you wonder at the strange woman who stopped you? Did you realize that awful woe from which my commonplace words sprang? No, no, what grown mind could take that in, least of all a child's? To have forsworn the bliss of motherhood and entered upon a life of deception for this! Truly heaven is implacable, and my last sin is to be punished more inexorably than my first. There are worse evils than death. This I have always heard, but now I know it. God was merciful when he slew my babies, and I, presumptuous in my rebellion, and the efforts with which I tried to prevent his work. Frederick, you are weak, dissipated, and without conscience. The darling babe, the beautiful child, has grown into a reckless youth, whose impulses Mr. Sutherland will find it hard to restrain, and over whom his mother too, I call her your mother, has little influence, though she tries hard to do a mother's part and save herself and myself from boundless regret. My boy, do you feel the lack of your own mother's vigor? Might you have lived under my care and owned a better restraint, and learned to work and live a respectable life in circumstances less provocative of self-indulgence? Such questions, when they rise, are maddening. When I see them form themselves in Philemon's eyes, I drive them out with all the force of my influence, which is still strong over him. But when they make way in my own breast, I can find no relief, not even in prayer. Frederick, were I to tell you the truth about your parentage, would the shock of such an unexpected revelation make a man of you? I have been tempted to make the trial at times. Deep down in my heart I have thought that perhaps I should best serve the good man who is growing grey under your waywardness, by opening up before you the past and present agonies of which you are the unconscious centre. But I cannot do this while she lives. The look she gave me one day when I approached you, I stepped too near at the church door. proves that it would be the killing of her to reveal her long preserved secret. Now I must wait her death, which seems near, and then no, I cannot do it. Mr. Sutherland has but one staff to lean on, and that is you. It may be a poor one, a breaking one, but it is still a staff. I dare not take it away. I dare not. Ah, if Philemon was the man he was once, he might counsel me, but he is only a child now, just as if God had heard my cry for children and had given me him. More money, and still more money, and I hate it except for what it will do for the poor and incapable about me. How strange are the ways of Providence to us who have no need of aught beyond a competence. Money pours in almost against our will, while to those who long and labor for it, it comes not, or comes so slowly. The life wears out in the waiting and the working. The Zabels now, once well-to-do shipbuilders, with a good business and a home full of curious works of art, they now appear to find it hard to obtain even the necessities of life. Such are the freaks of fortune, or should I say the dealings of an inscrutable Providence. Once I tried to give something out of my abundance to these old friends, but their pride stood in the way and the attempt failed. Worse than that, as if to show that benefits should proceed from them to me rather than from me to them, James bestowed on me a gift. It is a strange one, nothing more nor less than a quaint Florentine dagger, which I had often admired for its exquisite workmanship. Was it the last treasure he possessed? I am almost afraid so. At all events, it shall lie here in my table drawer, where I alone can see it. Such sights are not good for Philemon. He must have cheerful objects before him, happy faces such as mine tries to be. But ah, I would gladly give my life if I could once hold you in my arms, my erring but beloved son. Will the day ever come when I can? Will you have strength enough to hear my story and preserve your peace and let me go down to the grave with the memory of one look, one smile that is for me alone? Sometimes I foresee this hour, and I am happy for a few short minutes, and then some fresh story of your recklessness is wafted through the town, and what stopped her at this point we shall never know. Some want of Philemon's, perhaps. At all events, she left off here, and the letter was never resumed. It was the last secret outpouring of her heart. With this broken sentence Agatha's letters terminated. That afternoon, before the inquiry broke up, the jury brought in their verdict. It was death by means of a wound inflicted upon herself in a moment of terror and misapprehension. It was all his fellow townsmen could do for Fredrick. End of Part 3 of Why Agatha Webb Will Never Be Forgotten in Sutherlandtown. Recorded by Gabby Cowan.